if you are a US issuer and you do incorporate in the US, you're sort of at the mercy of waiting until the regulators actually make a rule.
If you liked this video, click below. And if you want to see more videos like this, click subscribe and then remember to click the little bell icon so you get notifications.
Enormous concentration of power.
Democracy, poverty reduction, and cryptocurrency.
Are you sophisticated enough to invest in securities?
Bitcoin is actually a reversion to commodity money.
Decentralized social networking.
What about the transactions that happen with, let's say, a US seller, yeah, and a non-US buyer? So I found this to be very interesting because, for two reasons. One is that if you are a US issuer and you do incorporate in the US, you're sort of at the mercy of waiting until the regulators actually make a rule. And as we've seen with the Jobs Act, I followed that back in 2013 and 14. The Obama administration promised something and then the Congress did something, but it took the SEC years to do anything.
That was fairly fast under SEC time. SEC time and geologic time are kind of the same thing.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of running my geologic clock by the SEC. So basically, we've got in the 90s, we had Regulation S, and it has two provisions, which I find interesting. One is Rule 903 and one's Rule 904, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So 903 is if the issuer themselves decide to sell the shares to, make the offer offshore. Perhaps they're advertising on Facebook. And we're talking about general public solicitation here. They're advertising on Facebook. The advertisement is targeted specifically to people in a certain town, Genoa, Italy, or whatever. And so people there, they've told Facebook that they live there and so on. And then they go to the server, which is hosted outside the United States also. The offer is made offshore. Everything's made offshore. And they go ahead and decide they're going to send Ethereum or whatever they're going to send, and they get the token, right? So that's regulation. That's Rule 903, right? It applies.
That's a very short summary of 903. We should encourage people who are interested in this to either consult a lawyer or to read the details, because the one thing that you mentioned that is very important in 903 is that the fact that the offer may not be made in the United States. And so if you're going to use Facebook in that way, as we've discussed, you have to be absolutely sure that it's not going to anybody in Cincinnati. The only people who are getting it are those guys in Switzerland.
Right, exactly. And sort of the standard, though, that they use is took reasonable steps to verify someone is not a resident of the United States. Let me ask you, by the way, just to clarify to everyone watching this, it is not citizenship status per se, but whoever is a U.S. person is for the purposes of Reg S defined to be a resident of U.S. or U.S. territories, right? And if they're not, even if they're a U.S. citizen, but they are now residing for years in China, then they're not considered a U.S. person for the purposes of Reg S. Is that right?
Yeah, you might want to talk about specific, as the SEC always says, it's facts and circumstances. In general, the starting assumption is that a U.S. citizen is going to be a U.S. person, but there are some people who are not. I mean, there are some people who don't even know they're U.S. citizens, for goodness sake. They were born here to foreign parents, they moved back, and they suddenly realize that they actually had citizenship all along. So the starting point should always be, are you tax residents, for example? If you're paying taxes to the U.S., it's a good indication that you're a U.S. person.
And the other way, though, is important. If someone is not a U.S. citizen, but they reside in the U.S., maybe they have a work visa, a tourist visa.
They're a U.S. person.
They are a U.S. person.
Yeah.
And that applies to U.S. territories as well, like Guam, I guess, or something.
I get this all the time. It's just like, well, do we count Puerto Rico? Yes, you do. You absolutely count territories. Some of them should be states, but U.S. states and territories, it's all America.
There you go. Yeah, I know some people who moved to Puerto Rico for the tax benefits, but I don't think they are still US.
They're not overseas, they're Americans.
They're still Americans.
If you want to see more videos like this, click subscribe and then remember to click the little bell icon so you get notifications. Intercoin, making crypto mainstream.